The moment your eyes land on these 4 living rooms, one of them immediately feels different, doesn't it? It almost feels as though it reached out to you before you had time to think. Maybe you can't explain why, but something within you quietly resonates with that space. Don't overanalyze it. Simply choose the one that drew your attention first. And once you've chosen, hold on to that feeling. There's no need to justify it, no need to explain it logically. In-depth psychology, especially through the lens of Jungian thought, this kind of choice carries meaning. It's not about surface preference. It reflects something unfolding within your inner world. This choice doesn't arise from conscious reasoning. It emerges from the unconscious. That silent, deeper part of you that understands symbols long before the conscious mind tries to interpret them. You may not realize it, but what you're drawn to reveals more than you expect. A living room is not just a setting. Symbolically, it represents a space of rest, intimacy, and return. It reflects who you are when you are not performing for the world. It's where your guard lowers, where your authentic state quietly lives. So before we go further, pause for a moment. Which room truly called to you? The unconscious doesn't lie. Let's begin with the first living room. This space feels open, expansive, filled with light. The glass ceiling allows the sky to pour in, dissolving the boundary between inside and outside. There's a sense of freedom here, of breath, of movement. If this room spoke to you, then something important is stirring within you. You are someone who needs space, not just physically, but emotionally. You may feel uneasy when things become too confined, when expectations pile up, when life starts to feel heavy or restrictive. There's a quiet but powerful longing for clarity, for openness, for air. Those drawn to this room often carry an unconscious desire to escape not necessarily people, but limitations, old roles, outdated identities, expectations that no longer feel true. In Jungian terms, this reflects a psyche moving through differentiation, the early stages of individuation. Individuation is not about separating from the world. It's about no longer living only to satisfy external projections. And the glass ceiling becomes a powerful symbol here. It lets light in, but it also removes the ability to hide. To live authentically is to become visible, and that is where the tension lies. If this room calls to you, you may be standing at a threshold. Part of you longs to be seen, to be understood as you truly are. But another part hesitates. You wonder how to reveal yourself without being judged, without being hurt. You want authenticity, but not at the cost of safety. This push and pull is not weakness. It is the natural friction of growth. Many who resonate with this space have spent years adapting, learning how to be acceptable, functional, even pleasing. But over time, something inside begins to feel suffocated. The light in this room is not just aesthetic. In symbolic language, light represents consciousness, something becoming visible within you. You may be starting to recognize patterns that once operated unconsciously. Repeated behaviors, limiting relationships, choices made from fear rather than truth. And that realization can be exhausting. So the psyche reaches toward openness, toward a space that says, I need to breathe. But here is something essential to understand. Too much openness carries its own danger. If everything becomes exposed too quickly, what has not yet been integrated can become overwhelming. As Jung warned, consciousness without structure can lead to anxiety. When everything is transparent, there is no shelter. When everything is illuminated, even the shadows become more intense. So ask yourself gently, are you craving freedom, but fearing what it will reveal? This room represents a crossroads, a moment where you begin to redefine yourself, not based on who you were told to be, but based on who you are becoming. And that process, while liberating, requires both courage and care. Now, let's move deeper into the journey. Now, let's turn to the second living room. Immediately, the atmosphere shifts. Unlike the openness of the first, this space feels grounded. enclosed and warm. Wood, stone, and fire dominate the environment. There are no vast glass surfaces, no overwhelming exposure. Instead, there is weight, there is structure, there is a sense of rootedness. If this room drew you in, the message from your unconscious is very different, but just as important. Here, the psyche is not seeking expansion. It is seeking stability. Those who resonate with this room are often tired, not just physically, but emotionally. There may have been too much change, too much unpredictability, too many moments where you had to remain alert, adaptable, and strong. Over time, that constant tension begins to wear you down. And so, something deeper begins to call for rest. Not superficial rest, but a return to something solid, something reliable. Wood in this space symbolizes slow, natural growth. Growth that takes time, that builds roots, that does not rush. Stone represents endurance, what remains when everything else shifts or collapses. And the fire at the center becomes the heart of the room, a contained warmth that sustains life without overwhelming it. In Jungian psychology, such imagery often appears when the psyche has spent too long adjusting to external pressures. It signals a need to withdraw, not as an escape, but as a necessary step to rebuild an inner center. If you chose this room, you may be reaching a point where you no longer feel the need to prove yourself. The desire to impress, to compete, to constantly adapt, it begins to fade. What replaces it is something quieter, but far more powerful. A desire to feel secure within yourself. This is not about isolation, it is about foundation. There is a key distinction between this room and the first. While the first longs for openness, this one longs for containment. It says, I need boundaries, not to shut the world out, but to preserve who I am. This often emerges in individuals who have already experienced emotional overexposure. Perhaps you trusted too quickly. Perhaps you gave too much of yourself, hoping to be understood or accepted. And in doing so, you may have felt depleted. The unconscious responds by creating images of shelter, not to hide, but to restore. Notice how the fireplace functions in this space. Unlike the glass ceiling that illuminated everything in the first room, the fire here warms a single central point. It does not spread everywhere. It is contained, focused, intentional. This symbolizes something essential, the regulation of emotional energy. Not everything needs to be shared, not everything needs to be explained, and not everyone deserves access to your inner world. In Jungian terms, this reflects the construction of an inner home, a space with walls, doors, and boundaries. A space that is not open to every passerby, but one that invites selectively, based on alignment, not obligation. If this room resonates with you, it may be time to begin saying no more often, not out of resistance, but out of self-respect. There is a quiet maturity forming here, a realization that intimacy is not about how much you give, but about where and with whom you choose to give it. You begin to understand that depth cannot exist without limits. And within this realization, something ancestral may also awaken. Wood and stone connect to time, to lineage, to what has endured before you. Your unconscious may be guiding you back toward values that modern life often overlooks: consistency, patience, commitment, and depth. A life that is not constantly shifting, but one that is built. This room does not shout. It does not demand attention. It offers something far more subtle. It offers stability that nourishes. But even here, there is something to remain aware of. The desire for safety, if taken too far, can become rigidity. Walls meant to protect can slowly turn into barriers that isolate. The same boundaries that preserve you can, if unconscious, prevent new experiences from entering your life. So the question becomes, are you creating a home or are you building a fortress? The difference is not in the walls themselves, but in whether the door remains open. This room represents a powerful phase of the psyche, a phase of grounding, rebuilding, and reclaiming inner authority. It is where you begin to understand that your energy is not infinite and that where you place it matters. Now, let's step into the third room. At first glance, it feels entirely different from the others. There is a sense of order here, almost striking in its precision. The space is minimal, clean, structured. Sharp lines define everything. Objects are few, carefully placed, and nothing appears unnecessary. There is no excess warmth, no overwhelming openness, just clarity and control. And yet, if you stay with it for a moment, you may notice something subtle beneath the surface, a quiet tension. If this room caught your attention, or perhaps made you feel slightly unsettled, it carries a powerful message from the unconscious. This space represents control, but not control over others. It is about internal control. In Jungian psychology, minimalist environments often arise when the psyche is attempting to quiet overwhelming inner noise. Too many thoughts, too many emotions, too many external demands. The mind, in response, begins to simplify. It removes what is not essential. It organizes. It creates structure. This room is not empty by accident. It has been intentionally cleared. Those drawn to this space have often experienced periods of emotional overload, moments where everything felt too much, too chaotic, too unpredictable, too difficult to process all at once. And so, the unconscious begins to seek simplicity. Less stimulation, fewer conflicts, more order. If this room resonates with you, there is a strong possibility that you have learned how to function under pressure. You've developed systems, routines, ways of thinking that keep everything from falling apart. You understand the importance of structure. You rely on it. Because without it, things begin to unravel. But here lies the deeper layer of this symbol. There is a fine line between simplicity and suppression, and this room sits directly on that line. The clarity you see here may reflect a psyche that is organizing itself through reason, categorizing experiences, reducing unpredictability, creating a sense of control over what once felt uncontrollable. And in many ways, this is a strength. People who are drawn to this room are often capable, responsible, and highly functional. You know how to maintain order. You know how to solve problems. You don't easily depend on others to carry your emotional weight. But there is a cost. When everything inside becomes too controlled, too structured, there is less space for what cannot be organized. Emotions that do not fit neatly into categories begin to disappear from awareness. But they do not disappear entirely. They find other ways to surface. Quiet anxiety, persistent tension, a sense of fatigue that has no clear explanation. This room reflects someone who has learned to contain emotions, not because they lack depth, but because at some point it felt necessary. Perhaps early in life you discovered that expressing emotion led to conflict, misunderstanding, or instability. And so, you adapted. You created an internal system that works. But functioning is not the same as feeling whole. Notice how this room feels. It is comfortable, yes. But is it warm? It is efficient. But is it alive? This is where Jung's insight becomes essential. In the process of individuation, there are stages where the psyche must differentiate, must organize, must create boundaries between what belongs to the self and what does not. This is necessary. Without it, there is no structure. But if this stage continues for too long, something vital begins to fade. The unconscious notices this imbalance, and it begins to signal. If this room speaks to you, it may be time to gently ask yourself, where in your life are you maintaining control at the cost of aliveness? Where have you chosen order over expression? Where have you silenced something within yourself simply to keep everything stable? The answer is not to abandon structure. Structure is not the problem. The question is whether there is still space within that structure for emotion, for spontaneity, for the parts of you that cannot be planned or predicted. This room is not a mistake. It is a phase, a necessary step in learning how to hold yourself together. But now, it may be asking something more of you. not to lose control, but to allow life to move through it. And as we move forward, we arrive at the fourth and final room,